Every day we face hurdles in our life and problems that require new approaches or breakthrough innovations. In this podcast series, we're going to meet people that take audacious swings for the fence because they believe that changing the game is their personal responsibility. They believe it is up to them to be the solution. Hi, I'm Mark Forche. I'm the president and CEO of Delphinus Medical Technologies, and welcome to our podcast. This is the first of the Be the Solution series, and all my life I've been fascinated by innovators that stare at challenges and find new processes and new technologies to find their way around them and find their way through them. In this series, we're going to be speaking with those types of innovators. So today, I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Rachel Brem. Dr. Brem is Vice Chair of Radiology at George Washington University and the Chief Medical Officer of the Brem Foundation. Of course, your last name is Brem. That makes a lot of sense. Welcome. So, Dr. Brem, I'm sure
delighted to be here. So, thank you.
Awesome. I am sure in your life you had lots of opportunities to think about different medical specialties, but you chose radiology. What was the reason for that?
So I was a medical student in the 1980s, and I was a medical student at Columbia, New York, which is where the first real study looking at the impact of mammography on breast cancer was done. And they saw a 20% reduction in the death rate from breast cancer in women who were getting mammography and women who weren't. And in fact, it's kind of mind-boggling to think about the quality of the imaging that was done in the early 80s. But I just decided that I really wanted to be part of that. If you would take a step back, going into medicine was a leap in my family. I come from, I wasn't born in this country. I'm an immigrant. My parents obviously were immigrants. And they didn't know what a woman doctor looked like. There were none. And when I was 12, my mother had breast cancer, was given 6 months to live, and lived 44 years. And I'm sure part of that is early detection. So as a young girl, I decided that I would do everything I could to make sure that other families weren't impacted as profoundly as we were by breast cancer. And that was the impetus to go into medicine, and then being at the right place at the right time in New York where the HIP study was being done to really impact the death rate from breast cancer was the motivator for me to go into radiology.
Yeah. So really similar thing for me, not to go into radiology as a physician, but my mom had breast cancer when I was a young man, and it was a really impactful thing. I spent 30 years of my career in ophthalmology, but saw that there really are unmet needs here for us to address, and I thought this is a great opportunity to do something. So, I left 30 years of ophthalmology to come into this, and when I first entered this space, I kept hearing your name a lot as a person I should be recommended to speak with, and so I reached out to you, and I remember the first time that I met with you, I was really impacted by your love for innovation. You seem someone that really adopts it quickly, or kind of an innovator, early adopter. So what's your thoughts about that? I mean, what makes a great innovation? What do you see as the value of great innovations?
So I didn't go into medicine just to practice medicine. I saw that by early on in my career as a medical student, that by implementing technology, we markedly decreased the death rate from breast cancer to 20%, but it should be 0%. Mm-hmm. And it was at that time that I realized that if we could find impactful, effective, innovative approaches, that we would keep chipping away at the death rate from breast cancer. And we have, the death rate from breast cancer has gone down 40% now. And that's mind-boggling, but it's 60% too high still, right? Mm-hmm. So until the death rate is 0, and that will be achieved with innovation, with technology, with really novel, creative approaches towards breast cancer, whether it be early detection or therapies or liquid biopsies. I mean, there's so many exciting things happening. But for me, going into radiology and being involved in technology to keep decreasing the death rate for breast cancer was really the impetus for me and the motivator for me. And, you know, as a young girl, as a 12-year-old, when my mother had breast cancer, there were so many challenges. I had a 5-year-old brother, a 13-year-old brother, and she was constantly ill, but never lost the will to live. I mean, she would have done anything to live. And, you know, she went from this vivacious, redheaded, whirlwind person to never quite being the same after the breast cancer, although she remained an important positive influence. But it was really a profound change, and it was something that was really important for me to impact. And it was selfish as well, because I knew deep down inside, long before we had genetic testing, long before I realized how deep the breast cancer in our family went, I just had this inkling that I would be part of that narrative as well, and was hoping that we could impact it for people like my mother, myself, and for the tens of millions of people that are impacted by cancer.
Yeah, well, glad you've taken that as a challenge. So one of the things that as I look at your career and things that you've focused your attention on, you've done a lot of things with dense breast modalities, technologies, studies. What drove you to that, and what do you see in that as a still unmet need?
So having dense breast tissue is really a critical issue. When I started out in radiology, we were told not to do ultrasound screening, and that really ultrasound was for cyst versus solid and to guide biopsy. But it became evident, increasingly evident, that women with dense breast tissue are the perfect storm, right? That mammography, although in women with predominantly fatty breasts is 90% effective or sensitive, in women with dense breast tissue, it's only about 85, or in some studies 50% or even less effective at identifying early breast cancer. And coupled with that was the fact that women who have dense breast tissue have a significant independent increased risk of developing breast cancer. And that the population of women with dense breast is not small. 50% of women have dense breast tissue. So, here we had the opportunity to answer a critical need, a huge population of women where mammography, although very effective, is much less effective in a population of women who have such an increased risk, a markedly increased risk of developing breast cancer. So we needed to find a solution for that. And in fact, it was, as luck would have it, I personally experienced that as well. So at the age of 37, being the director of breast imaging at that time, my role was to identify equipment that we were going to buy, and it was just beginning to be when ultrasound was increasingly being used in the mid-90s, increasingly being used in breast imaging. And so one night after a busy clinical day, I'd asked all the vendors to bring their different ultrasound equipments in, and wanted to try it out on myself just to see the image quality. And so two things happened in that evening. One is I did find which ultrasound equipment we were going to buy, and the second is I found my own breast cancer. So here, it was prophetic, we were told not to screen with ultrasound, but screening with ultrasound found my own breast cancer. And this was 2 weeks before I had been scheduled for prophylactic mastectomies, because I really had recently found out that I was BRCA positive. I had the gene mutation that markedly increases a woman's risk of developing breast cancer, 80% lifetime risk. And I really wanted to change my family's narrative. Wow. But as you plan and you can't always plan. So I had scheduled for prophylactic mastectomies and ended up finding cancer and being treated for cancer with chemotherapy and mastectomies as well.
So, very personal experience, but thank you for taking that and leveraging that to try and make things better. One of the things that I think about a lot is, there are technologies out there that radiologists can use. They can use to try and find cancers in dense breasts, but it seems like nothing has quite hit the mark totally and answered everything. So what's your perspective on that? Some of the things that are available now and how they fit the need.
Yeah. So we found that initially sort of the legacy technology of screening breast ultrasound is that it's very effective, that we find 25% more breast cancers with screening breast ultrasound in women with dense breasts. And the thing to remember about these cancers is that they're really important cancers. And you might say, well, every cancer is important, right? But these are small, invasive, almost predominantly, almost exclusively node-negative cancers. So these are killer cancers that if we find early, we can cure. And so that was early data. Then ABIS came out, which is automated whole breast ultrasound. And we found, that data showed that we can find the same number of cancers and it was automated. And so that's the development of technology and innovation, and I feel very lucky that I was part of that process as well. But there were a couple of things. One is, it really wasn't designed to be done at the same time that a woman is seen. So she would have to come back for another visit, and that would put such a big obstacle in really widespread implementation. The second is that it was uncomfortable, that it is uncomfortable. It requires a fair amount of compression on the breast, and women do complain about that fairly consistently. And then finally, the callback rate is very high. It's very high, almost unacceptably high. And so we do have the opportunity to find more cancers, but the callback rate requiring more ultrasound, more biopsies, is really too high. And I think that's one of the reasons, primary reasons, that it hasn't become as widely implemented in clinical practice as one would expect, right? So the question is, where do we go next? What's the next step, right? So we have this really effective tool that we've got to improve on so that we can decrease the number of biopsies, do it in a painless way, and do it the same day that the woman comes in. And that's what I saw by first getting involved with Delphinist and with SoftVue, which is we have the opportunity to find early, curable, invasive breast cancers in a painless way because of the way the patient is imaged. She's imaged prone, with her, meaning on her stomach, with her breast hanging in a water bath, a very comfortable position. There's no compression at all. Women find this very comfortable. We do it, it's designed to be done the same day. And perhaps sort of most mind-boggling is that we can do all that because of the really novel technology and decrease the number of biopsies. We have a tool that we can find more cancers with less callbacks, less negative biopsies. So it's a humongous transformational contribution to the field that will really take us to the next step.
Yeah, of course I agree with you on that part. But one of the things I should say, is hats off to the innovators that went before us. People that innovation can be an evolution, and then all of a sudden one day there's a breakthrough that really advances something, not just incrementally, but makes a big change. So, as a company, Delphinus, I think we owe a debt of gratitude to those that took on these challenges before us and gave us things to look at and areas to improve on. And I think we took that as a blank slate to try and advance this. And I think one of the things, though, that is probably most novel as I think about Delphinus SoftVue as an innovation is the triple acoustic detection, seeing reflection, sound speed, and attenuation, and gathering that data. That's a critical part of what we did. but it only matters if it does something and gives you value in some way that you don't have now. So I'm curious your thoughts of that and what kind of value you see that providing for you.
So that is, a great question, because I want to step back a second and talk a little bit about this really innovative triad technology. With traditional ultrasound, you have a transducer that emits a wave, right? And then the transducer, it bounces off tissue, and that's how the image, of course, is generated. But what we need to do is really talk about tissue properties. And the way we can do that is by not only having reflection, but transmission. So with the triad technology, we have a ring transducer that can both, so it's kind of like a CT scan where they're transducers and opportunities to image with both reflection and sound waves that go through tissue because of the circular transducer where it's through the tissue. And as a result of that, we can get tissue properties. And it's that tissue property component that allows us to not only find more cancers, but to understand the tissue properties to decrease the number of biopsies of benign lesions. And we found an 8% reduction increase in specificity, 8% reduction in callbacks. But I really want to talk about this a little bit further, both in terms of two things. One is what's coming ahead, why this is really so important now, tomorrow, and a little bit further in the future. And then I want to talk about how this might impact healthcare disparity, because that's a really big issue with breast cancer. So right now we have an incredibly powerful tool to help us find these cancers with lower reduction in biopsies and callback rates. It kind of looks like an MRI. It really looks like that kind of an image when you look at the image. It's really a novel, it's acquired in coronal images, three-dimensional. And I should add that one of the differentiators between SoftVue and other 3D ultrasound is because the patient is lying prone, and because we do have the secure approach where we can extend the breast. That's probably one of the reasons that we have less false positives as well, because instead of having the breast kind of mushed on your chest wall, right, it's extended. And so like with MR, where you can see the tissue, and we know more expanded, and we know that that's really important with mammography, with MRI, and undoubtedly with ultrasound. So this new technology has brought that in. But in the future, I know that we are very excited about the artificial intelligence, the AI, that will help us not only analyze the lesions that we find, but help us find lesions. And then one of the other things is, we have a lot of physiologic approaches to imaging, but they require an injection, MRI, even contrast-enhanced mammography, nuclear medicine imaging of the breast. They all require injection of a compound that we tolerate but don't want in our bodies. But with ultrasound contrast, which is bubbles, they're just bubbles, then we will have the opportunity, very likely, and I'm hopeful that we'll get the kind of MR information that we get, real direct vascular physiologic information in a non toxic way. And then I just want to add a few more things. Can you tell that I'm excited about that? A few more things. We have some very exciting data currently with SoftVue. One is that we can identify breast density as well as mammography with no ionizing radiation. So if you think about the impact of that, right? Young women ask all the time, well, what's my breast density? We're not going to use ionizing radiation on young women to figure that out, but now we can, particularly as the incidence of breast cancer, the age at presentation is decreasing. So this is really the first reliable demonstration of breast density with no ionizing radiation. And another indication of the physiologic information we get is we have some really exciting preliminary data that after one round of neoadjuvant chemotherapy using SoftVue, we can determine if someone is going to respond based on the characteristics of the tumor following the neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And wouldn't it be, it's like mind-boggling to think that we don't have to subject a woman to multiple rounds of chemotherapy to see if it's going to work, but we will be able to reliably identify those women whose chemotherapeutic regimen is appropriate for them, and for those that are not, that we could change their chemotherapeutic regimens early on in the course of treatment.
So you're speaking of a number of things that, if you think of this as a platform that collects, because of the triple acoustic detection, collects amazing quantitative data that we can do amazing things with for the future. But come back just for a second to patients only get to experience those innovations in the future if they are able to be seen and screened.
That's correct.
and they're exposed to the system. And I think a lot about the impact of patient experience on utilization. And I think it's one of those things that, I guess about half the women that should be screened don't get screened. Why? There's a lot of different reasons why. And so things like a water bath, things like finding more cancers, improve sensitivity, and just the comfort of the patient experience makes a difference. So that in conjunction to workflow. So one of the novel things of the SoftVue approval is same-day screening. So why does that matter?
We know that if a woman has to come back another day for another study, the likelihood that that's going to happen is going to be lower. And in communities, underserved communities, that's even more true. So I think the design, the workflow design of SoftVue is such that it is for same-day imaging, and it is much more efficient. Even imagine that a woman has to come back and get registered again and wait in the waiting room again, and all the realities of healthcare. Well, we can do that all at one time, and that way, we can really harness the power of this technology to many more women. And that's a really important thing. And the other thing is that it's comfortable. A lot of women will be very reticent to repeatedly get screened if it hurts. And with SoftVue, we know that it doesn't hurt. So it will allow us to obviate the difficulties of ABIS, of the pain that women feel, the discomfort, by having the exam with SoftVue. So, and I do want to get back to disparities, healthcare disparities. The death rate from breast cancer in Black women is 40% higher than it is in white women. We know that Black women have denser breasts as well, and it's very multifactorial. But I think this is really going to be one of the technologies that we can use to really help leverage and equalize the playing field in breast cancer. And we have a moral obligation to do that, because women, Black women and certain other populations of underserved women have a much higher rate of triple negative breast cancer, which is invasive and very aggressive and really needs to be found early. So we can use this technology to begin to answer some of the real critically important disparity issues in breast cancer. And I think that's really exciting, and it's really important.
Yeah, I think that our entire team is driven by exactly that. I mean, I think we look at this as an opportunity to transform clinical thought, practice, access, ability to assist those patients and help those patients. And so it takes really passionate people like you with great ideas that stare at a wall and say, how do we get through that? What can we do technologically to get through it, to help us get there? Just one last question. I mean, one of the things I think a lot about is, as we do products as a medical device innovator, I think a lot about the influence of everything around us. So I kind of think of things that I use every day, and our customers will use them every day, and they impact their way of looking at things and how they weigh medical device technologies. What's a innovation that you particularly like, and what element of it might you use to measure a medical device by?
Well, the metric that I would use to measure is its impact, its effectiveness, even if something is a wonderful idea. And we have to really take it through. Things like liquid biopsies will clearly be an important part of our future. They're not quite ready for prime time yet. But I would take it back more to say it's identifying the challenges and trying to find innovative ways of answering them. So for instance, the Brem Foundation, which is a 501c3, a nonprofit that a number of patients and I started over almost 20 years ago, dedicated to early detection. And so we noticed that in many underserved populations, even though mammography is free under the Affordable Care Act, if you can't get to a mammogram, right? If a whole breast ultrasound hurts, then you're not going to do it. So we, even not a technology, using what's around you, we said, well, wow, what about if we could take them to their mammograms at no cost? So, we developed a program called Wheels for Women. We partnered with Lyft, and we now use their front office to help take women. We support women, the transportation needs of women to go get free mammograms, free life-saving mammograms. And if we can, continue, I think the biggest challenge is identifying the obstacles. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why SoftVue is so audacious, as you would say, because it really looked at, yes, we have breast ultrasound, yes, we have automated whole breast ultrasound, but why isn't it working? And how can we not only design a way to overcome the challenges of why women and workflow issues are making it difficult for radiologists to implement into clinical practice, but make it even better where we can increase the specificity, let's sort of, find the answers to the challenges. Yeah. So, I've always, as I've always liked technology. I've always, I had the 10th Tesla in Maryland. My husband had the 9th. I've always liked technology. I've always really enjoyed implementing novel, new technologies, but not just for the sake of technologies, but for the sake of really improving something, and of course the thing that's most passionate for me is improving breast cancer. Actually, I'd love to never have this discussion where breast cancer could be prevented, but until that time, if we can diagnose early curable breast cancer with continual innovation and implementation of new technologies, then we're making the world a better place, and that's why SoftVue is so important.
Yeah, well, I love the saying, a well-defined problem is nearly solved. And so it takes passionate people, insightful people, people astute in that area, an expert in that area, to identify things and then lay out solutions. And so thanks for the work that you have done in this space. I think it's fantastic. I'm sure that there are many people that have benefited from the work that you've done, and we appreciate it, and I've enjoyed working with you. To our viewers, let me say thank you for being part of this podcast, watching this first episode, and we encourage you to join us again as we speak with innovators that face challenges in their efforts to be the solution.